Hi everyone, this is Jason Burek of Wall Street from Main Street. Welcome back to another Wall Street from Main Street podcast interview. Today's special guest is a returning guest. Haven't had him on in a while. Mo's interviewed him though recently. He's a best-selling author of many books, including, I think, Doug, it's the greatest investing book, selling investing book of all time, Crisis Investing. Is it still the number one seller of all time?
That's questionable because it certainly was when it was released, but you know the finger writes and having written moves on. That's been true since Khalil Gibran wrote that phrase. I don't know, but it's still a very good book, Crisis Investing. Actually, Crisis Investing for the rest of the 90s is actually a much better book, but perhaps because it's better and more sophisticated, it didn't sell as well. That's kind of the way things work in the publishing business.
That's interesting. I actually have a question about crisis investing later in the interview. You've also written The International Man, Right on the Money, Totally Incorrect, which was a compilation of a lot of your interviews over the years from Casey Research. And you've traveled all over the world, been to almost every single country, and the founder of Casey Research. Doug Casey, thank you for joining me again.
Well, absolutely.
Now, Doug, I want to ask you about President Trump. He's a very interesting man. In your opinion, has he done anything you like so far?
Yeah, he has. And a bunch of things I don't like, and a bunch of things that are confusing, mixed messages. Where to start talking about Trump? First of all, I'm very glad he won because I placed several real money bets with other people that he was going to win. I felt he was going to win because I felt that there's a real culture clash going on, and that was Omar Khayyam, not Khalil Gibran. Sorry, sometimes you confuse these names. But anyway, going back to Trump, because what we have going on in the U.S. now is a real culture clash. This is very, very serious. It's not just a political disagreement between the Democrats and the Republicans where you can have a polite conversation. It turns out that these people hate each other. It's the kind of atmosphere that you find before an actual civil war or insurrection of some type happens. So has Trump done anything to deserve this? Well, I think his physical wall with Mexico is unnecessary and a bad idea. Why do I say that? Because as long as there was zero welfare in the country to draw people in, and all property was privately owned, so that if anybody was staying here, they'd have to be paying rent for it. It's a non-problem. In fact, the Mexicans aren't a non-problem unless they come here to get on the gravy train of welfare. The problem is the U.S. government actively importing people from totally alien cultures around the world, generally where they've had a war, and then reward the quislings that were on the side of the invader with visas and so forth and subsidies to come to the U.S. So that's one problem, a mistake that Trump has made, but he hasn't done anything to make people hate him the way so many of these people do. And who hates them? It's basically the so-called progressives, the cultural Marxists, the hardcore leftists, the Hollywood people, academics, government employees. I mean, these are just horrible people that live in the swamp. And it's not a swamp. It's actually a cesspool. It's too kind to call it a swamp. But anyway, I've probably spoken too long in answer to that question already.
when you came here and visited me and you were working on your first book in the Speculator series, I remember when we were eating at the Founding Farmers restaurant in Potomac, Maryland, there was that nice shopping mall, and you said this was all built by parasites. That really stuck in my mind. But you great points there about the culture now, how it's divided. I mean, there's surveys now on these dating websites, Doug, and the women put on right on their dating profile, they don't even want to speak to anyone who's a libertarian or who voted for Trump. So, there's like big cultural divides. I've heard from friends of mine who listen to this program crazy stories about, people who are married and the husband voted for Trump and the wife, is hardcore progressive, Hillary Clinton brainwashed, and there's divorces going on like crazy because of this. So, literally houses are being divided now over what happened in the election. This is, I think, Doug, this is decades of what you said, cultural Marxism. I think we've gotten to this culmination point of compounding of cultural Marxism to this endpoint now.
I think you're absolutely correct. And as far as families splitting up over this, this is really a philosophical divide. So I'd say if you're married to somebody who dislikes Trump because he's not an adequate leftist, I'd say good riddance, quite frankly. I mean, I don't see it as a problem, but this could actually turn violent in the months and years to come, because when the economy turns down, when we leave the eye of this financial hurricane that we entered in 2007, they're going to blame whoever is president, and it's going to be Trump, and he's going to get blamed, and it won't really be his fault. Well, if he puts up big taxes, import duties, and so forth, yeah, that could collapse the economy, and it might be his fault then. It's another one of the stupid things that he's doing. But yeah, this is going to be a story with an unhappy ending, at least in the near term.
Yeah, I agree. I've looked through financial history. I know you have, and I don't see a lot of cases where long-term protectionism solves very much. It leads to trade wars, and then we have currency wars, which would eventually start, and then potentially, withholding of resources. Whereas, the U.S. put up tariffs on rubber and oil for Japan, and that baited Japan. Basically, the FDR wanted Japan to attack Pearl Harbor so he could get the U.S. into World War II. So we know that from declassified government documents that was one of his plans. But, Trump has talked about, fixing the economy. But, Doug, it seems to me he wants to spend a lot more. And I see, worse stagflation coming, even if he doesn't get a lot of these import taxes passed. So I see a lot of different cases for a lot worse stagflation coming based on Trump's spending policies.
Well, I agree with you, Jason, because he's come out and said that he wants to spend another $54 billion on the military, which impresses me as completely insane, since the U.S. is already responsible for almost half of all of the military spending in the world, and he wants to spend more. I mean, to make the U.S. safe, what they should do is withdraw the troops that are in something like 150 countries around the world. American soldiers are everywhere. There's 200,000 American soldiers someplace in the world, and we don't know what they're up to. So the military budget should be cut in half and then cut in half again. But so that's very bad. And a lot of the people that he's got around him are swamp creatures. I mean, they're part of the political elite. So that's a mistake. It's very nice that he wants to cut back and rein in the EPA and some of these other agencies, but it doesn't do any good to cut them back. It's like pruning a plant. If you just prune it and cut it back, it grows back stronger and bigger. And that's what's going to happen when he's out of office. So none of this is very good, frankly.
Yeah, I completely agree. As soon as Trump's gone, if the Democrats regain control of both houses of Congress and the Democrats put a president in, they're going to go right back to massive amounts of spending on the welfare state. They're going to want to increase any taxes that Trump decreased. They're going to want to re-implement those or increase taxes higher. But I just see in both political parties, Republicans and Democrats, they're not defenders of liberty. They've been destroying our rights. They've been destroying us with taxes and inflation for so long that it's really unbelievable. And we've gotten to the point now where a lot of people, their standard of living in the middle class is basically destroyed, and they're blaming the wrong people for it. So I think you just talked recently, you did an interview on Casey Research about the politically correct movement. When I try to have an honest conversation, like you said earlier in the interview, with a Democrat, I try to bring up the debt problem. I try to say, we can't afford all these different entitlements. We can't afford all these different government agencies with their ever-increasing budgets. That without having a rational conversation, you're automatically called racist, sexist, xenophobia, you hate old people, all these other things. And here you are trying to point out some basic numbers. It's just not right. And I think a lot of it is this politically correct culture that has really festered over the decades. Have you researched this? Did you see that it started with like Antonio Gramsci about 100 years ago, and this was his plan to start it off with government schools and eventually control the media, and this was a plan that to eventually destroy capitalism and the United States?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct about that with Gramsci and so forth. But incidentally, when you discuss this with cultural Marxists and liberals, it's and all you can do is discuss it for your own amusement. It does absolutely no good to argue with these people. Their minds are made up. But when you do, I would suggest don't do it from a practical point of view. We can't afford it and so forth. If you're going to talk with them at all and you want to attempt to have a meeting of minds, which I said is very hard to do with these people, you've got to approach it from a moral and ethical point of view, because that's what they believe, that they're correct and right and just and noble and good. So you have to approach this from an ethical point of view and shock their foundation, because my personal belief is that these people are evil and destructive, but you have to approach it from an ethical point of view, right and wrong, not economic or non-economic.
So that's like the Ayn Rand altruism. We have to defeat that argument that this greater good, that they're really destroying all these people's lives in the process. Then.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct, but unfortunately, you and I are on the wrong side of history, because everybody that goes to college and universities today, well, it starts earlier than that. It starts in grade school, and it gets worse in high school. And by the time you get into college, most of your teachers are communist sympathizers. I know that sounds radical to say, but it happens to be true. So you've got these idiots paying $50,000 or even $100,000 a year to go off and take courses in gender studies and all kinds of ridiculous things like that, and to be indoctrinated. And so when they heard all these ridiculous and destructive things from people in authority, and are paid big money to do so, well, of course they parrot it back. It's very hard to change their name. So everybody that's going off to college is on the wrong side of this argument from your and my point of view, or the point of view of personal freedom and economic opportunity. So, the battle's pretty well been lost. And going back to something else earlier, it's that a lot of the people that voted for Trump, and of course, I support him over, the criminal coterie he was running against. But the thing is that they're looking at the Republican Party as their salvation. This is insane. I mean, the Republican Party is just the other arm of the deep state. So they're going to be brutally disappointed if they support the Republicans. Because if you look at the Democrats as being the evil party, which they are, then you have to call the Republicans the stupid party. And it's ridiculous supporting them. They don't stand for anything. They just believe that essentially that the Democrats are moving too slowly towards the good things that they want for everybody, or moving too quickly, too radically towards the good things that they want. They don't argue with them about whether they should actually want these things or have these things or not.
I view the Republicans, Doug, more as cowards. Both parties are enormously corrupt. I had to block like 5 people on Twitter today. They were those hardcore leftists that you were talking about. They were just shocked when I brought up how James Comey was getting paid. The head of the FBI now. He was a lawyer for the military-industrial complex. He was getting $6 million a year. To be a deep state lawyer, military-industrial complex. Then when HSBC was about to be fined, they had knowingly, laundered money for Mexican drug cartels. And so they had committed criminal charges, and they hire Comey as a fixer to come in and basically make the charges go away. So it's really unbelievable. Our podcast is so large now. I get government regulators who listen around this area to come and speak to me off the record and share their stories of corruption and how frustrated they are. College campuses, though, Doug, I think this is getting really out of hand. Have you seen how like libertarians now, just for setting up like libertarian booths and handing out like leaflets of the Constitution, so they're being arrested recently? The free speech on college campuses in the United States and Canada is basically being outlawed. Dissent in a lot of cases is being eliminated. And all this cultural Marxism, Doug, it seems basically like the goal of all the leftists is basically to say if you're a Republican, you're evil. Based on the moral high ground argument that you so eloquently put earlier in the interview. But I think the goal has to been to basically get the United States all into one party. So if you have any other views other than the mainstream Democrat view, then you're evil. That's the way things have gotten to me at this point. I don't remember this when I graduated college 10 years ago. Things were nearly this bad. But I think, finally we've gotten to that blow-off top point with crazy ideology where it's turned into like, religious neo-McCarthyism and a witch hunt. Now, I don't remember a witch hunt 10 years ago. I think we've gotten basically to witch hunt levels now.
Yep, you're absolutely correct. It's quite amazing what's happening. And of course, it's not just in the U.S. It's happened all over the world. I mean, the Europeans are much worse off than we are in the U.S. So I hate being on the wrong side of history, but what are you going to do?
Doug, I got in another argument on Twitter with a European, and he was trying to tell me that the governments in Germany and Austria and other Scandinavian countries aren't as corrupt as the governments in the U.S., and I kind of agreed with him about that, except that I told him that taxation is theft, and taxation is a form of corruption. So he didn't like that very much. So I was like, yeah, maybe they're not, doing all these lobbying scandals and all these other deals for stock options that a lot of people in Congress are doing, or trading stock options on inside information like a lot of Congress members do. But, they're still like the taxes in those countries are sky high, and I view taxation as theft.
Of course. Well, look at Bill Clinton. You'll recall that when he was in office, he was saying, I don't have any money to even pay my legal bills. I mean, he claimed to be bankrupt, in effect. But now he's worth a couple $100 million just since he left office. Because the U.S. is the kind of society where, unlike Argentina, where I'm talking to you from right now, when you bribe somebody, you give them a briefcase full of $100 bills. It's cash on the barrelhead, payment in advance, thank you very much. But in the U.S., which is still kind of a high-trust society, the payoffs are more subtle, but also bigger. You get a multi-million-dollar book contract. You get multi-$100,000 speaking engagements. Great way to pay off. I mean, Hillary, the first bribe that we know she took was the $100,000 payoff which was disguised as cattle trading profits, which is completely absurd. Anybody that knows anything about the way those markets work. Then you get consulting fees, and you get corporate directorships, and so that's how the payoffs come in the U.S. And I hadn't heard about Comey, but very interesting. No, it's completely disgusting. I mean, I actually hope these people have the fate of Mussolini during World War II, if you recall what that was. They certainly deserve it.
Yeah, they hung him upside down, right, for a while, and let the blood drain out. They had Eric Holder and Loretta Lynch, who were attorney generals. They were also extremely corrupt. I heard. I'm not sure if this is true or not. I heard it from someone on Twitter. I'd have to research this more. But I heard Comey's brother, Peter Comey, actually was involved in doing the taxes for the Clinton Foundation. And we know, that the Clinton Foundation was cheating on his taxes and never actually registered in most U.S. states or in foreign countries as a charity. So, that was, according to my friend Charles Ortel, the Clinton Foundation was a $100 billion global charity fraud and the largest global charity fraud in history. So,
well, it was really just a gigantic slush fund. And I'm so disappointed in Trump. First of all, he should appoint a special prosecutor, an independent prosecutor, to go after these people, tooth and nail. But he's not doing that. In fact, after the election, he's saying all these criminal personalities, he calls them good people and wants to get along with them and, says nice things about them, which is completely insane. I mean, first of all, they're not good people. And you shouldn't say things like that. He's just going to alienate his own base. So, I had some hope for Trump, but less and less as time goes on, I've got to say.
Yeah, I agree. I'm frustrated with you. So I didn't vote for Trump, but I preferred him to Hillary Clinton, considering I heard that Hillary Clinton was threatening to, basically throw people in jail like Matt Drudge and Alex Jones and anyone in the independent media, such as myself, who is trying to call both parties out on their corruption and bullshit. Now, I want to transition, Doug, and ask you about your views of the global economy. You travel a lot more than I do. I hear hedge fund managers talk about the U.S. dollar shortage, right? But we have record amounts of dollar-denominated debt. So if we have a dollar shortage, why was there so much debt borrowed in dollars? It seems to me it's more like the alcoholic who drinks all the booze at his house and then says, oh, there's an alcohol shortage, where all they have to do is, go to the store and get more booze, or there's lots of booze available. So I think this dollar shortage is really BS because of the record amounts of debt outstanding.
You're quite correct. And this happens everywhere. Like in Venezuela, they have a shortage of bolivars, which is their national currency. They have to import them by the plane load. And they can't even afford to pay the printers for new bolivars to solve their bolivar shortage. And in Germany, during the 1920s, when they had their famous inflation, they printed more money because there was a shortage of Reichsmarks. So this is going to end very badly. The main export of the U.S. at this point is U.S. dollars. I mean, the trade deficit, it's hard to say what it is. They have official numbers, and then there are other numbers. But it's going to be in the order of $1 trillion a year. In other words, about the same as the U.S. government deficit. And we export these dollars, which are floating around outside the U.S. Foreigners aren't obligated to take them. It's just convenient to take them. But at some point, all these trillions and trillions of dollars that are outside the U.S. are going to come home to the U.S. in exchange for the shares of public companies and land and everything else. And it's going to impoverish Americans who have been living way above their means for decades, subsidized by the foreigners that have been taking this paper money and in exchange giving us Mercedes and Sonys and other types of real wealth, coffee, cocaine, you name it.
Doug, do you think why these asset prices, the valuations on these things in the bond market, real estate in many different countries, including the U.S., and large cap dividend stock valuations, do you think the reason these valuations are so high is because a lot of this money in other countries that you talked about is starting to already come back into the United States, and people are already starting to trade in their dollars for real assets?
Yes, of course. And don't forget that the U.S. government has created trillions of new currency units since 2007. And the Europeans and the Chinese and the Japanese and all these little countries have created scores of trillions of new currency units. Now, where's all that money gone? It's basically created bubbles in the financial markets. It's created a super double bubble in the bond market with negative interest rates, which I thought was metaphysically impossible. It's created a huge bubble in the stock market, which is now above the bubble levels of 2001, which is pretty hard to believe, but it is. It's created real estate bubbles, and it's been done with issuance of a lot of debt. which some people owe to some other people. So when interest rates start heading up in earnest, that's not going to be able to be a service. So the question becomes, are we going to have a hyperinflation because they keep printing up money, or are we going to have a catastrophic deflation when a lot of this debt is defaulted on, and therefore the funny money it represents goes out of existence? The only thing you can predict for sure is financial chaos and a gigantic economic depression.
Without the central bank intervention and politicians and central planners changing the rules, I think we would have already had the deflation because we would have had a bust. You know, the banks wouldn't have gotten the bailouts after the 2008 financial crash. But with the intervention, Doug, you know, the money, we're not getting the velocity of money and the turnover in the real economy yet for a hyperinflation. So I think they can keep things in stagflation, worse stagflation for a while. I can't give you an exact amount, but we haven't had a financial crisis since 2008. It's coming up on almost 12. It'll be 12 years by 2020. Normally now, once the dollar lost its last gold backing in 1971, we've had a financial crisis every 7 to 12 years. So I think like the absolute latest time we have the next financial crisis is by 2020, if not sooner.
Well, I'd have to agree with you. And so the answer is it's impossible today to be a long-term investor. You have to be a speculator, one that takes advantage of politically caused distortions in the market. And here, Jason, I've got to put a plug in for my last book, which is also my first novel, the first of a series of 7. And the book is called Speculator. And especially if you've got listeners who are under 40 or better yet, under 30, they should read that book for many, many reasons. It's a good read, incidentally, very good read. But it talks a lot about Africa. And this is something that nobody thinks about. And if you're a speculator, you want to think about things that other people aren't thinking about. So instead of spending money on what passes for education, they should get on a plane to some country there and groove into that continent, because it's chaos central, but a great place to make money, especially if you're young.
Now, Doug, you get on a lot of planes. You travel all over the world. I want to ask you about capital controls everywhere. You know, it seems that these governments, a lot of them, whether it's the U.S. with FACTA or other countries, not the FACET. I'm thinking of the French guy who put out the book for the global wealth tax. He wants all the governments to coordinate and enforce.
Yes, his name was Thomas Piketty.
Yeah, Piketty. Yeah, Thomas Piketty. Yeah, so do you think then that during the next financial crisis, we're going to have a lot more capital controls, and it's going to be very difficult for, say, someone in the United States to be able to diversify their assets, invest in assets in other countries?
Yes, absolutely. Because when you have financial chaos caused by the government, all these silly chimpanzees out there want somebody in the government to do something, and the government feels an obligation to, quote unquote, do something. So what can they do? They can only put on more controls of various types. So one of the controls they're going to put on is to stop Americans from sending their money outside the country. And the most important thing you can do now is diversify politically, geographically. Because your market risk right now is huge, but bigger than the market risk is your political risk. So but it's already very hard for Americans to do this, because you go to a foreign bank in almost any country now. If you're an American, they're not going to open an account for you. They're not going to take a brokerage account for you. It's too much liability and risk for them. So the doors are already closing, quite frankly. There's just, so that's the first thing people should do. That's why I'm talking to you right now from Argentina.
Maybe people should invest in a second passport then first, so they can travel on the other passport and open up an account.
Well, of course, because here's something else that most people are completely unaware of. If you're accused of owing the IRS $50,000 or more, not adjudicated as owing them that, accused of it, they can cancel your U.S. passport. Cancel it. Not just not issue one, cancel the one you have. Now, this is a very big deal. So now you're really trapped like a a lobster in a trap. This is very serious. These things are happening now on a monthly basis.
The other great analogy, Doug, you've used in the past is the milk cow. I feel like I live right outside of Washington, D.C., and, there's all these, when I go out to eat at a restaurant, there's all these new little taxes that are added, and it seems like every year or two, they're just increased a little bit. 1% here, 2% there. I'm hearing that all the local governments want to keep increasing property taxes because they all have their little central planning pet projects. It's getting extremely frustrating. It's destroying people's standard of living.
Well, the good thing about that happening in Washington, D.C., it's not going to happen too much in Washington, D.C., because all those people there are close to the fire hydrant of money that's flowing out of the Federal Reserve and so forth. But I'd love to see the markets collapse around Washington and see all these bureaucrats get what they deserve, which is something a lot worse than losing money on their houses.
Yeah, Doug, Trump has actually talked about not only has he done a hiring freeze for certain government industries, although he's moved that money to military, but he's also talked about cutting back 25%. There was panic for the last couple weeks from government bureaucrats, and I saw that we're working government agencies posting on Facebook. So there's real terror there, and the real estate agents around here are worried about that too. If you were to rewrite a few chapters of your best-selling book, Crisis Investing, what would you change based on what's happening right now?
Well, the whole world the basic economic principles haven't changed at all. So that would stay exactly the same. And you've got to remember that book was written during a time of very high interest rates where the U.S. government was paying 15% on T-bills and T-bonds, more on T-bonds actually. So now it's exactly the opposite. And things nearly went over the edge back then. I think this time there's no way out. So I wouldn't change any of the basic principles on it, but I've got to say, Jason, that one of the reasons why I wrote this novel, Speculator, is that you can say things in fiction that you really better not say in nonfiction. So that's why I chose this format. And incidentally, in this coming July, I'm coming out with the second of the series, which is Drug Lord, where our hero Charles Knight, who makes a huge amount of money in Africa, I'll take you back to that again, does the same thing in the legal and illegal drug business. And I think it's quite an education in that part of the economy. So, but you can say things in fiction you can't say in nonfiction. I want to emphasize that.
Do you think the mainstream media has changed? Because in the past, I know you were on Donahue and you used to do the mainstream financial media circuit, and you were well respected on there years ago. If you went on there with a similar message to back then, it seems the tone there has changed compared to now. The views that they wouldn't be as accepting of what you had written in that book back then compared to now. That now they would call you names and slander you and can call you fake news and things like that at this point.
Well, look, there's no way that I could get on national. In those days, Donahue was as big as Oprah was before she went off the air. And I don't know who's replaced Oprah now. So it was huge. And I had an hour all by myself on Donahue. And of course, you saw that. It's on YouTube. But I couldn't even get on national media today because the leftist channels absolutely don't want to hear the kind of thing that I have to say. And the only right-wing channel is Fox, and they don't want to hear it either because they're basically conventional rah-rah, raise the flag, love the military, U.S. government type people. So nobody wants to hear this stuff. So it's pointless. Yes, you're quite correct. The entire landscape of the media has changed totally since the days when I was on Donahue.
My final question before I wrap up this interview. I know you made a lot of money speculating in the Briac scandal. You got out before the fraud collapsed. The gold movie with Matthew McConaughey just came out. I've heard you call the gold mining business a matchstick business. Do you think that the gold miners will still have this big rush? Because it looks like, the gold mining industry is just so poorly run. So many of these companies, it looks like they're going to either go bankrupt or sell out for pennies. It's a very frustrating business to even speculate in for a short amount of time. How have you been able to do that successfully over your career?
Well, I've come to recognize that mining is about the worst business in the world for many, many reasons that we could have a separate interview talking about why mining is a horrible business. Many, many reasons. That's a whole different conversation that will take a half an hour. That's the bad news. The good news is that the stocks of these mining exploration companies are still extremely volatile. And I think gold is going to go into a fantastic bull market. It's not particularly cheap right now. I mean, I remember gold when it was $35. It was cheap then. It was cheap in 2001 at 250, when in real terms, it was cheaper in 2001 than it was in 1971 at $35 an ounce. So it's not really a giveaway right now, but it's a bargain level. And I think over this cycle, we're going to see gold at $2, $3, $4, let me say it, $5,000 and more an ounce. So these little stocks are going to howl. They're not investments, they're speculations. But I just want to emphasize that. Gold mining is not an investment, it's a speculation. These things are hot potatoes. They're burning matches, okay? You hold on to them too long and your fingers will get singed. So, but now's the time to buy them, having said that.
Yeah, I completely agree. Even when gold was at 1900 in 2011 and silver almost touched 50, the primary gold and silver miners, they weren't generating much of any free cash flow. Their costs were actually rising faster than the metals price.
Yeah, of course. And the all-in sustaining cost of the mining industry as a whole is close to $1,000 an ounce today, because the world is pretty well picked over. And the only thing left are very, very low-grade deposits that are extremely capital intensive. And who wants to put down a couple $1 billion of capital to mine something that can be, taxed at will, or horrible business?
Yeah, exactly. And there's so many. I did a short video for our listeners on our channel last year listing a dozen things that could go wrong with a gold mine, even if the economics look good. How, there could be flooding at the mine, the cost could go 20, 30, 40% higher. The government could play games with the taxes on the mine. The government could remove the environmental permits. We had that. We had a situation where Barrick, I think with Pascua-Lama, was lying that they had the environmental permits already done. So there's so many things that can go wrong that, when a retail person who is not a sophisticated investor, SEC accredited investor, they don't know all the things that can go wrong. And, they read one article or they see like a YouTube video promoting a gold stock and they go and buy it and they don't understand the risks involved that can, the stock could collapse.
I know, it's so true. But now is a good cyclical time to get into these things. This is speculation, in my opinion. But we'll see.
Yeah, I think you're gonna be right, because if the gold and silver price go a little bit lower, especially for the silver miners, because so much of the silver is not above ground and a lot of the annual silver supply is not recycled. The silver miner, I was told by one gold mining executive, I wasn't given permission to use his name, but he looked at all the primary silver miners' balance sheets last year, and he said basically, look, if the silver price is in $25 to $30 an ounce in the next year or two, the silver miners, a lot of them are going to be bankrupt in 5 years because they're not generating any free cash flow. They're not reinvesting in any reserves. So basically, they've kept their heads above water and bought themselves a year or two to delay bankruptcy, but that's about it.
Yeah, that's right. All commodities are actually quite cheap right now. Farmers aren't making any money on grains or cattle, cocoa, coffee. All these things are very cheap, and that includes gold and silver, quite frankly. So, well, the best cure for low prices is low prices, because we need these things. So they'll cyclically go up. That's why I'm a buyer of things right now.
Well, Doug, I enjoyed our conversation. I hope we can speak again soon. And for our listeners out there who want to check out your book, it's now available on audiobook on Audible for Speculator. So I'm going to go buy that soon. I know you sent me the PDF copy. I didn't have a chance to read it. I'm going to get the audiobook very soon, though. And I enjoy hearing your views in fiction because, Walter Block did write Defending the Undefendable, but we know a lot of Americans wouldn't read something that controversial.
Well, I think this book is at least as controversial as my good friend Walter Block's Defending the Undefendable, which incidentally I reference in Speculator, because Speculator itself is kind of undefendable from a politically correct point of view.
Yes, and you said you're planning seven fiction books in the Speculator series, and the next one's coming out next year.
Yes, it's coming out. It's actually coming out this July, Drug Lord. So in order to keep up with the adventures of Charles Knight, who's only 23 in Speculator, you've got to read that book now or you're going to fall behind. It's, let's call it Harry Potter for politically incorrect adults.
I'm going to use that. Well, thank you again for your time, Doug. I really appreciate it. And have fun down in Argentina.
Thanks, Jason.
Mo and I are trying to raise $1,000 per month for our Patreon account. We have over 2,600 viewers per YouTube video, so if we can get most of our loyal listeners or all of our loyal listeners to donate $1 per month or up to $5 per month, which would be amazing, that would cover most, if not all, of the money that we need. So we also accept one-time donations if you go to the wallstreetformainstreet.com website. We accept donations in cash via PayPal. Fiat, you can donate there. You can donate Bitcoin through our Bitcoin wallet there on the website, or you can donate gold and silver. We have a gold money account, and we also accept mailed donations of physical gold and silver. Thank you guys for listening, and we appreciate any and all help. Please forward it to friends. Okay, bye.